The Summoner, Gloomhaven's most hated class, and for good reason. There's a lot of management that needs to be done, and there's a ton of room for error, and that's why I've created this guide, to help you manage the Summoner, to help you take advantage of the Summoner's strengths, and to go through a lot of tips and tricks to manage your summons and make sure they don't die. One of those is going to be understanding monster focus, and we'll go through that, and then we'll make sure that you're not clogging up the battlefield and taking an hour on each turn. And if you can do all these things, the Summoner is extremely powerful, close to top tier class, and this is backed up by somebody who works with Isaac Childress. I believe his name is Marcel. There's a quote floating around out there where he talks about the Summoner and how it can be extremely powerful. So in this guide, we're going to go through all those things so that you can maximize your Summoner game. So how do we make sure that our meat shields, summons, actually do something and that they're not just out there taking one hit and dying? We're going to talk about summon AI, utilizing movement, making sure that you're in the right position yourself as the Summoner, using that hit point pool to protect your summons so that you can keep them out there. And if you can keep them out there, they can do some serious work for you. So we'll go through all of those things, and I'm going to try and change your opinion of the Summoner. A key part of playing the Summoner is understanding the monster focus rules and the summon focus rules so that you have a good idea of what's going to happen on the battlefield, and you can proactively make sure your summons are in the right place to either do damage or avoid damage. One of the biggest problems with a Summoner is that if you make mistakes and the monsters come in and they destroy your summons, you can become ineffective very quickly. All right, so you're summoning. Summons go in the order, and they always go before you, but summons go in the order that they were summoned. So when you summon something, make sure you put a token under each summon, use the same color, and then if you go past 4 summons, use a second color so that you always have a good understanding of which summons are going to act first, because this is going to be critical for you when you're actually making your plans. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you summon 2 wolves. Even for the 2 wolves, even though it's 1 card, you're going to put a 1 under one and you're going to put a 2 under the other. And let's say that you've been playing them for a turn or something, and the first wolf has lower hit points and the second wolf is full. This first wolf is still going to move in and find his focus first. You're not going to be able to move that second wolf in front to take aggro. So just make sure you're planning for that. And then always summon your Thorn Shooter first. And we'll talk about this more later on. But if you're running wolves or something like that, it's great to have your Thorn Shooter first, because it's going to fire off, it's going to poison enemies, it's going to soften them up for the rest of your summons. Going fast for the Summoner is a pretty tall order. Our fastest initiative at level 1 is 24, and then throughout our entire set of cards, it's 13. We are really great at going late though, so make sure you're using late as a major strategy for the Summoner. You go late in a round so that you're not focused, especially when your summons are equidistant to enemies compared to one of your allies. And then when you're summoning, very often if you're summoning a melee summon, you can put them at the back and go slow and allow them 1 turn to get in close, and then go slow again and then go fast, so that your summons can make sure to get a late attack and then an early attack with no fear of being attacked from the monsters. And when I say no fear, I mean you're going to go as fast as possible, and once in a while you're going to get beat, but it's still a very viable strategy for getting minimum 2 attacks out of your summons with, let's call it, low danger. More on the theme of keeping summons alive, we're going to use burst damage sometimes to keep our summons alive. So make sure you're using your bottom attacks and some strong attacks as well, so that you can kill enemies before they get a chance to attack your summons. And then also, we really want to use our positioning well. Summoner actually has great move. There's a couple good jump moves, things of that nature. So you can maneuver yourself around the battlefield as well. And you really need to use yourself as an aggro sink to take some of the aggro off your summons so that you can keep them alive as well. So make sure you're out there and using that hit point pool. You can't just stand in the back and fire off ranged attacks all the time. Sometimes you're going to need to get involved in the fray to protect your summons. And one last thing, your summons do act when you're on a long rest. So you can be very effective and long rest, and your summons are going to continue to do work. And that also means that when you're picking items, it is a great pick to pick a spend item for the summoner because you're able to long rest more effectively than other classes because you're still able to do work even when you're long resting. Wild Animation is going to be our best early summon, but it's got one drawback, and that's the move. So to counteract this, I like to go ahead and go very late in the first round, and I'll use the bottom move of Mighty Bond, and I'll actually jump over the enemies and set it behind them, set the Thorn Shooter behind them, or off to the side as well. And what that does is you're going to put it out of range still, so that it's not getting focused, and it has 4 range, so it's going to be able to sit there and it's going to be able to fire away with fairly low risk, and you're going to put it up near the next door. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to get your Thorn Shooter into the second room a lot easier, maximizing your time, and then you can use Unending Dominance later on to get it back for rooms 3 and 4. The move on Wild Animation is really nice. But using the strategy I just talked about, around being able to use it in 2 rooms, its top is just far too powerful to use the bottom unless you're using some sort of alternate melee build, and that's cool too if you're doing that. But generally you want to use the top, and it's going to, do a lot of work for you. So, don't leave home without Wild Animation. Leathery Wings is just not a good summon. It's too squishy. It's got decent move and it's flying, so it's going to be able to find a focus, and it's going to die quite quickly as soon as you're above like scenario level 0, and you're mostly going to be above that. It does produce wind, and once in a while you're going to get a couple turns out of that, and maybe that could be useful for somebody else, for another class you're playing with or something along those lines, but it's just not going to be good for you. The bottom strengthen, it's all allies, but you can't move. And it makes it really tough to pull off. One thing you can do with Leathery Wings, though, that is semi-effective, and at early levels this may be useful for you, is you can go late in a round, you can summon your wolves, and then you can strengthen them. And then next turn, there's going to be a couple strengthened wolves coming out for some attacks, and that can be pretty powerful at low levels. Volatile Flame is a summon that can do some pretty good work for you, and at lower levels, it's fairly powerful. It's going to go in, it might get 1 attack, it might get 2 attacks. I really like to just unload it into a room before I go in there and let it soften everybody up. But it's going to do some pretty good work. And then the bottom is good for burst damage when we're trying to kill off enemies and we're using a bottom and top attack. Living Knight is pretty good if they're shielded enemies. So if you know they're shielded enemies and you're at scenario level 3 and below, you can definitely take the wolves. They're going to do some good work for you, and you can leave something like Volatile Bomb behind. Past that, they're going to run out of steam. As soon as enemies have shield 3 and above, these guys are not going to do very good work for you. But there are some combos that you can use kind of in mid-level, so stick around. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the bottom of this card is actually fairly decent and can help your summons with survivability. So between Volatile Bomb and this one, it's kind of a toss-up. It depends on the scenario. All right, we've also got Forged Ferocity here. And the Iron Beast can do some good work against enemies that have multiple attacks, but low damage attacks. But he's going to have trouble keeping up. And most of the time, he's not going to do a ton of work for you. But there are some things you can do with the bottom. You can enhance the bottom later on, and we'll talk about that later in the video, and I think this is going to be really powerful for you. Also, if you do want this guy to keep up, you can sort of use the same trick I talked about with Wild Animation, which is jumping to the other side of the first room and summoning on that side so that he's much closer to the door. so that he doesn't have to cover nearly as much ground to get into room number 2. Next, we're going to talk about your best card, Unending Dominance. But first, if you could, go ahead and like this video. It really helps me out a lot. And subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so that as I put out new content, you're notified. And also, just briefly, I've got another video I've made. I think you're really going to like it. I've ranked all 22 Gloomhaven classes, including Jaws of the Lion, and including Forgotten Circles. So go ahead and check that out. I'm going to put a link up right here and go see how your favorite characters stack up against the rest of the classes in the Gloomhaven universe. Unending Dominance is a core card for the summoner. So let's talk about the bottom first. Get back 4 lost cards. This is going to allow you to get back summons that have been killed or who have fallen too far behind, and they're not going to be able to make it to help you in later rooms in the scenario. And this is really going to help you out with your longevity as well. So, I mean, it's a great, powerful card. Kind of like the Spellweaver's Reviving Ether. Slightly less powerful, but very, very useful. The top, Summoning the Golem, it's pretty good at lower levels. You can get a lot of work done when you're at scenario level, maybe 2 at the highest. But once you start getting up higher than that, it's too risky of a play. It's much better to play the bottom and get back 4 of those lost cards, whether they're summons or other cards, than it is to gamble on a golem who gets killed in 1 or 2 attacks because the monster's pulled, an unlucky card for you. And don't forget that Unending Dominance, whether you play the top or the bottom, is a cannot recover card. It is not a lost card. So you play it once, and you play it once only. Blackfire is a great card. It doesn't look that powerful at first glance, and it's not overpowered, but it's very useful to us. First, at level 1, it's our fastest card. So when we're trying to go fast, we're going to gamble at 24 and use this card. The bottom is very good for controlling how much damage your summons take. And so you can move in, you can muddle a bunch of adjacent enemies and weaken attacks on your summons if you can't avoid them any other way. And this synergizes well with the Golem if you're taking it at lower levels. Because it produces flame every turn, you can use Blackfire, fairly consistently to wound. And then it also synergizes well with Volatile Flame, as that produces fire as well. This is a great card for us. Doesn't look super powerful, but it's something we have to take for all those reasons. Biting Wind is another great utility card. If you do have wind, which is tough for us because we're not taking the summon that produces wind, but if you do, you can use this to push enemies away from your summons, push them into traps. It's going to be quite useful for you, and it'll be, just a reasonable attack 3. And then the bottom is really good utility as well for, keeping your tankier summons topped up with hit points or helping your allies or whatever. And at initiative 25, it's good for the summoner. So we're definitely taking this card as well. We're going to talk about Mighty Bond and Bonded Might together because they're so similar. Mighty Bond is vastly superior because it's got that move 4 jump. The loot one is nice, but it's pretty tough to loot without moving on a bottom action. And so we're going to use Mighty Bond a lot of the times to maneuver around. And we're going to use Bonded Might top to actually control our summons. And don't forget, one of the most important parts about these cards is that they allow you to control the movement of your summons. So you're going to be able to use this to move a summon around, to target a different enemy, to make sure they're not taking a ton of aggro and gonna die. And so the move part of this is actually more important than the attack part because it allows us to keep our summons alive. These are both core cards, especially at level 1. Ethereal Vines is a fantastic card for control. Attack 1, whatever. Range 3, immobilize 3 potential enemies. Reusable, is very, very strong. And it's got good initiative. I mean, 30 is pretty good for the summoner. I feel sad just saying that, but 30 is pretty good for the summoner. The bottom move 2 is going to allow you once in a while to keep your allies topped up by healing them, but I think you're going to be playing this for the top part like 95% of the time so that you can control melee enemies and manage the aggro against your allies and your summons. Unwavering Hand is an okay card. It's got some flexibility. The heal 3, range 3 is decent if you've got like a summon like the Rock Colossus that can sometimes need healing. And then the bottom, force one enemy to move 1 is okay. Once in a while you're going to get him into a trap and you might be able to move him away, but it's probably not powerful enough to take. This is going to be one of the cards I most likely leave at home. So what are we going to take? Well, let's start with what we're going to leave behind because it's less cards and it's easier. We're definitely leaving Leathery Wings behind 100% of the time. Almost always we're leaving Unwavering Hand. And then I'm taking the Wolves or the Volatile Bomb, depending on the scenario. So you can kind of swap those in and out. And then everything else is good. At level 2, we've got Earthen Steed and Grasping the Void. Grasping the Void is a very good card. Cursing and potentially stunning is really, really nice. The bottom can help us with burst damage, and that attack 2 at range 3 is not bad. And then we get to heal as well, so very good card. And then we've got Earthen Steed. The top of this can be useful, but I don't think most people are using it for the top. At initiative 13, this is our fastest card. And so when we need to go fast, we need to play this card. And the move 5 jump on the bottom is fantastic. This is going to allow us to quickly reposition, allow our summons to attack first, and it's an absolute must pick at level 2. Even though I really love Grasping the Void, there's just too many things that need to be done at quick initiative, and move 5 jump is just going to help you so much. You have to take it, even though it doesn't look very powerful. And I mean, it's a suggestion. I'm using pretty strong language here. I think you should pick Earthen Steed because it's just so helpful. At level 3, we've got Tear the Fabric and Oozing Manifestations. Yes, I have the sense of humor of an 11-year-old boy, but Oozing Manifestations just makes me laugh. So the top of Oozing Manifestations is pretty good. He's a pretty good meat shield. Shield 2 and Muddle is going to mean, almost 3 damage off on an attack. So even up to like mid scenario levels, he's going to be a pretty good meat shield. He's going to muddle people. He's going to be able to do some reasonable work, and he can keep up with you. I don't know why I'm calling an amorphous blob a he, but the slime spirit can keep up with you as well. So pretty decent summon. And then the bottom of this is actually really good for burst damage. I love having a couple bottom cards that I can combine with the top attack and, do some good burst damage. And you can immobilize, which is good control, and potentially curse as well. And then Tear the Fabric. The top is really good against shielded enemies. But they do have to be, 5 or less hit points. So it can be pretty situational. The heal 4 self is good as well because, like I said, you're going to be out there taking some aggro. But I do like to take Oozing Manifestation most of the time over Tear the Fabric. At level 4, we've got Living Mountain and we've got Divided Mind. The Rock Colossus from Living Mountain is pretty decent up until mid-scenario levels, but he runs out of steam after that where he can get beat up pretty quickly. He's nice if you have a Crag Heart though. He's making Earth every turn if you can keep him alive. And then the move to loot 1 on the bottom is good. The summoner needs a lot of money. Enhancing summons is great because they act every turn, and so you actually want to enhance a lot. The summoner probably needs the most money out of any class. And then we've got Divided Mind. And Divided Mind is going to be a great card, but just remember that you've got to be positioned really well, especially when you're going to use the bottom, because the summoner doesn't have any top moves. And so when you're trying to get 2 summoned allies within range 2, it can be tough to pull that bottom off. But still, great flexibility. And the top is really good for keeping your summons alive and maneuvering them around the battlefield so that they're not getting aggroed on when it's going to kill them. And then here's a nice combo that's kind of fun. You go late in a round and you summon 2 wolves, Then you play Divided Mind and you make them attack. So you've got to make sure that they're right against enemies so that they can attack right away. Then you use a stamina potion and you get Divided Mind back. Next turn you go as fast as you can, and then the wolves are going to attack again, and you're going to play Divided Mind again. So you're going to make them attack again. So now you're at 6 attacks. And then potentially you can play a card that makes them attack top, or you can do an attack on your own. That's going to be 6 attacks minimum from the wolves. So attack 12, pierce 12 with a top action. And especially at fairly low scenario levels, this is going to be very powerful, and you can rampage through some shielded enemies. So go ahead and try that out. Another great combo with Divided Mind is once you get to level 7, you can take the Void Eater, and then you pair it with a Thorn Shooter. And just by playing this card, you're going to allow them to attack twice. And so you're going to get 4 attacks in a round, and it's going to be a total of 11 damage. So Thorn Shooter attacks for 2 and poisons, and this is going to be on the same enemy. Then Void Eater attacks 3 curses, and then you play Divided Mind. Thorn Shooter does 3, and then Void Eater does 3. And so you're going to do 11 damage if there's no shields, and you're going to curse 2. And it's going to be a lot easier to use this card on 2 ranged enemies that are probably sitting fairly close to each other and not moving and just focusing on the monsters. So at level 4, I'm taking Divided Mind most of the time. At level 5, we've got Strength in Numbers and we've got Conjured Aid. Strength in Numbers is a pretty good card. You're going to swap it out directly for Bonded Might most of the time, I think. And it's going to be really helpful for moving your Thorn Shooter around because it's got that move +1. The attack +1 is just gravy. It's not super powerful. You know, your summons are doing 2, 3, 4 damage, whatever, but still good utility. And then the bottom, if you're playing with items that summon, and you've maybe got another class that's summoning with you, this card can do some serious work. You can easily get 6 or 7 attack, and it's going to be the same amount of range. So that's some pretty long range laser beaming. Just be careful. It's a bit of a trap card because you can't move. You've got to just sit there and play it. So you're going to use it for burst damage, but it can be pretty tough to play sometimes because you like to move a lot to keep your summons alive. And then we've got Conjured Aid, and the sprite is pretty good. Just remember that it's going to focus on the enemies first. And because it has range 3, this can actually make it a bit tough for it because it's shooting from further away than it can heal. And so it's going to focus on an enemy, and then it's going to do its heal after that. And sometimes you're not going to be in range, or nobody's going to be in range for it to heal. And the bottom 5 move is pretty nice. We've got lots of other move though. So I'm taking Strength in Numbers almost every single time. Also because later on we're going to have another summon, the Void Eater, that's going to be a lot better than the Healing Sprite. And you don't want to have a ridiculous amount of summons out at once. And so sometimes I think you're going to take the Healing Sprite and then you're not going to use it very much once you get to level 7. At level 6, we've got Endless Spikes and we've got Inexorable Momentum. Endless Spikes is just not a good card. I'm not really sure what was going on when this card was created. And if you do think it's good, go ahead in the comments. Let me know why you think it's good. But from my experience, once you get to this level, you're at level 6. You're probably at scenario level 3 or 4. Sometimes you're higher depending on, the level of your allies. But they very often die without retaliating. I mean, it's not that hard to get 5 damage and then the retaliate doesn't take effect. So I found this card to be pretty underwhelming. And then retaliate 2 affect all summoned allies. It's not that great either because most of your summons are fairly low hit points. And so when you play this, it's going to be worth a couple damage usually because you're only going to play it when a summon's actually going to stay alive. So this card, pretty underwhelming. Inexorable Momentum is quite good because our summons have trouble with shielded enemies because they're more about doing damage consistently every turn versus burst damage. So this is a great card to take to deal with shielded enemies. Pierce 3 is very strong. If you can use the wind, it's attack 5, Pierce 3. That's going to be quite good for you. And then the move 3, one adjacent summoned ally performs move 3. is pretty good, but just remember that you're not controlling it on this one. So this is really only good for catching up. This is great for when your Thorn Shooter has fallen behind and you want to push it up towards the next room, but it's not good for repositioning. But still, I'm taking Inexorable Momentum 100% of the time here. At level 7, we have Negative Energy and we have Staff of Visions. Staff of Visions is a pretty decent top attack. It's going to be good if you're in a melee build. I don't think we're in melee range a ton. And if we are, I think a lot of the times we're trying to take aggro and we're also trying to move our summons. And then the bottom move 3 Strengthen, affect all adjacent allies. If you can push the initiative of this down using an item or something like that, then this becomes pretty strong because you can give all adjacent allies, effectively 2 turns of advantage because it lasts until the end of their next turn. So if you go first, it's pretty good. And the initiative is solid at 27 for this class. But we've got Negative Energy at this level. And the Void Eater is, in my opinion, the best summon overall. It can output a lot of curses, especially when you're using extra cards to make them attack during your turn. You can output, a couple curses every turn. And over the course of, an entire scenario, it's very powerful. And the bottom, I don't think gets used a lot, but it can be very, very good in certain situations. So if you've got items that can summon and you're playing a melee summon build and you're summoning, some of your melee summons like wolves or something like that, and you've got a decent amount of summons out, I'm saying summons a lot here, and then maybe you've got an ally who is also doing some summons, you can put out a ton of curses with this card in a very short period of time. Like I've put out over 5 curses in one shot with this card. So based upon those things, I'm taking Negative Energy 100% of the time at level 7. At level 7, we've got Intervening Apparitions and we've got Otherworldly Rage. Intervening Apparitions, the top is a bit of a trap card. It can be effective in certain situations, but it's also very easy for an enemy to come in and waste it with a low damage multi-target attack. So you've got a few summons out, you've got somebody that does multi-target, and this happens a lot at higher levels where, some ranged enemies get some add target and stuff like that. Couple damage to 3 of your summons, it's all gone, and it did very little work. So it can be quite ineffective at times. And then the bottom is one of those cards that at times, once in a while, it's going to be amazing. You've got an enemy that's cursing you a lot. You get rid of all the curses. It's going to be super helpful, and producing light once in a while is good. And then Otherworldly Rage, the top looks better than it actually is because you don't get a move along with it. The move helps so much to reposition and make sure that your summon is doing the right thing. Instead, you just get an attack 2. And it is a more powerful attack. You add wound and poison, and it's good. Like if you add that to the Void Eater, it's attack 4 with wound, poison, and curse. So it's, it's good, but not having the move really lowers the value. And then the bottom, the old switcheroo, you can swap places with one of your summons. This is going to help you a lot to manage aggro and do some really cool things. It's going to allow you to get your Thorn Shooter somewhere that it needs to be. So for that reason, I'm taking Otherworldly Rage almost all the time. At level 9, we've got Horned Majesty and Interplanar Mastery. I don't know why those are making me laugh. Okay, so Interplanar Mastery. Pretty good utility. Get back summons for a 3rd time. Can, really allow you to use summons in every room. So good utility there. The move 6 jump is fantastic. And the initiative 22 is pretty good. And then the Horned Majesty, which is the glamour card at this level. The Unicorn's pretty strong, but in my opinion, it should have been 8 health. I mean, that would make it a lot more usable. 6 health, it's pretty squishy at later levels, or at higher scenario levels, but the attack 4, Pierce 3 is very powerful. And if you are going to use this card, you can build around it, although you've got to plan ahead. And you can take something like Intervening Apparitions, but only take Intervening Apparitions if you're going to do like a 1 summon build or a very low summon build, really focusing around Horned Majesty and getting it to attack a lot using top actions and then protecting it with intervening apparitions. If you do that, it can do some pretty serious work. And then the bottom is very powerful as well. All summoned allies within range 3 perform attack +0. That's pretty good. A range 3 helps a lot to get, all of your summoned allies, right? And it's all summoned allies. So if you are with somebody else who's summoning, you've got items for summons, this is going to be quite powerful for you. I think I take Horned Majesty a little bit more. I don't know. It's really, really close. I think it depends on how you're playing. But I think I go with Horned Majesty more often than Interplanar Mastery. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about a couple cheap enhancements. But if you could, go ahead, hit that like button. It really helps me a lot. It helps me get my content out to other people so they can enjoy it as well. So the first one we're going to do, the first enhancement, is Wild Animation. We're going to add a +1 to attack. This is going to allow you to output some serious damage over the scenario. Also, you could add +1 to the move if you're having move problems, but using the techniques I've described in this video, you should be able to manage the one move and get the Thorn Shooter through a couple rooms per summon, and so you probably don't need the move, but if you're having troubles, go ahead and do that. And the next one I think that's really cool is Forged Ferocity, and we're going to add Bless to the bottom of this, and if you've got somebody that's summoning allies as well, you could easily get 4, 5, 6 blesses per use of this card, and it is going to be amazing. It's going to bump your damage up because you're attacking a lot each turn with all your summons. 3, 4, 5 attacks around. So you're cycling through your modifier deck quickly, and you're going to crank through those blesses and do a ton of damage. The alternative, and this is a bit more expensive, is you can add a shield onto this, and this is going to be a, shield 2 on all summoned allies. I mean, that's going to be really effective as well, but, quite a bit more expensive. I would go with the Bless, and you're going to be outputting some serious damage. Perks for the summoner are pretty straightforward. Because we're attacking so much, we want to get rid of all the negatives and then start adding in positives so that you push that overall damage output up. And that's really going to help you, kill enemies faster and keep your summons alive. Don't worry about the heals or the rolling element stuff. I don't think those are going to be super helpful for you. For Prosperity level 1, there's not going to be any spoilers here, but I just want to say that if you've got items, if you found items that can push or pull, that is going to help you a ton to manage the battlefield, keep your summons alive so they're out there putting out damage. Next, at Prosperity level 1, the Cloak of Invisibility is really good because it can allow you to manage melee enemies aggro by blocking them from going to a certain spot and without, always taking damage yourself. So I like to take the Cloak of Invisibility. Also, you can take some things, you could take a heater shield or something along those lines, or some armor to mitigate damage, but don't take an armor that's going to add negatives into your modifier deck. I don't think it's worth it. And then for potions, of course, minor stam, minor healing because you're going to be out there, managing aggro and taking some damage yourself. I hope that helps. And if you could, go ahead, hit that like button. I know I've asked a lot here, but it really helps me out a lot. Subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so that when I'm putting out new content, you're notified. And thank you so much for watching the video.